stands at a crossroad in its history, particularly after an alarming period where its democracy was under threat. The Irfaan Ali-led government has begun setting the stage for the transformation of Guyana and for the country's bountiful potential to be realized with the passage of the 2021 national budget. On February 11, 2021, President Irfaan Ali made his maiden address to the National Assembly, where he set the stage for the presentation of the national 2021 budget and outlined the government's development vision for the next 5 years. With the 2021 national budget being the first full budget being presented under the PPP government, President Ali noted that in the last 6 months, feverish and difficult work has been undertaken to put before the National Assembly a full budget which can address the myriad challenges that confront the nation.
My government has encountered huge issues of transparency and accountability, of cronyism, of waste, and of fraud. Unemployment is much higher than the nation was led to believe. To fix this grim situation, we need to move now, and we need to move swiftly. We are faced with what Barack Obama described as the urgency of now. We want our factories humming with production. We want our people back at work. We want our businesses turning profits and investing in new and expanded enterprises. We want a Guyana that rises like a fabled phoenix from the ashes of neglect, spreading its wings and soaring proudly to the heights that should long ago have been its perch.
President Ali made it clear that he is committed to the creation of 50,000 jobs, and this will be made possible by the transformative agenda of the government that would see the expansion of construction, investment in mega-scale infrastructure, reduced cost of energy leading to industrialization and upscale agro-processing and manufacturing, environmental services, engineering services, and the spin-off of major private sector investments in new hotels and shore-based facilities. These are all catered for in the national 2021 budget.
The area of logistics and energy security would also see massive investments and opportunities. These, supported by the revitalization of our agriculture sector, support of mining, and expansion in quarrying, will pave the way for job creation.
The head of state added that the government is committed to providing the infrastructural framework in which these enterprises can develop and expand, improving directly the lives of all who invest their efforts in them and benefiting the country as a whole.
Each of us want a home, reliable electricity, water when we turn on the taps, education for our children, health facilities, and a job that will allow us to pay for those things. That is why job creation is at the top of my government's priority. But we recognize that while we create the conditions for more jobs and better incomes, there are immediate steps that must be taken to improve the living conditions for all. That is why we have removed VAT on electricity, water, medicines, and certain food items. That is also why we'll upgrade health facilities across the country, including expansion of diagnostic services such as CT scans, ultrasound, and echocardiogram at key regional hospitals, as well as improve ambulance services.
The following day, on February 12, 2021, Senior Minister within the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Honorable Ashni Singh, presented a $383.1 billion budget to the National Assembly under the theme, A Path to Recovery, Economic Dynamism and Resilience. Contained in this budget were a slew of measures aimed at making life easier for the ordinary Guyanese. More importantly, no new taxes were introduced to the citizens.
Budget 2021 is the first full-year budget presented by this PPPC administration since we were given a new mandate by the people of Guyana in the historic 2nd March 2020 general and regional elections. This budget comes after the emergency budget of 2020, which was prepared under a compressed schedule and arrived in this House well into the second half of the fiscal year as a result of the protracted struggle to defend democracy last year. That emergency budget delivered on this People's Progressive Party civic government's promise to provide immediate protection and relief to the long-suffering people of Guyana and breathe some life into the then moribund Guyanese economy.
Dr. Singh noted that in keeping with His Excellency's vision, Budget 2021 seeks to navigate COVID-19 for as long as it is around, keep the population safe, contain further spread, treating those who are infected, providing vaccines as soon as they become available, and reopening the economy progressively and then fully when it is safe to do so. Ensure a diversified and resilient productive sector by facilitating large-scale private investments in both traditional and new and emerging sectors, creating 50,000 jobs in the next 5 years, and promoting entrepreneurship at the medium and small business levels. He also noted that the budget aims to initiate investments in transformative infrastructure, including energy infrastructure, to ensure adequate supply at competitive costs, and transport infrastructure to improve international connectivity and unleash domestic production and productivity, and establish world-class social services such as education and healthcare so that these services are available to the domestic population, but also with a view to entering the international market for providing these services to a regional and global clientele.
Budget 2021 outlines a set of policies, programs, and projects which will not only catalyze economic growth directly, but will also see billions of US dollars of private investment realized across several sectors of the economy. Over and beyond oil and gas, the opportunities in agriculture, in tourism and hospitality, in manufacturing, in the service sector. And this is why I belabored the developments in each one of these sectors as I addressed them in the substantive body of this budget speech, really to make the point that each one of these sectors holds remarkable promise for the future of Guyana. Over and beyond oil and gas, all of these sectors are pointing to remarkable investment opportunities and tens of thousands of jobs being created in the shortest space of time. These jobs translate into incomes, and those incomes translate into prosperity, both at an individual level and inevitably at a national level.
The largest allocation in this year's budget was received by the Ministry of Education, with a total of $60.7 billion having been budgeted for this sector. The Minister of Finance noted that the immediate focus of the administration is pandemic preparedness, including the provision of personal protective equipment for all students and teachers, and to retrofit all schools with sinks and water systems to provide a safe learning environment across all levels. Provisions have also been made for the Cyril Potter College of Education to be transformed into a fully online compatible modality, spanning application forms to tutorials and courses. Minister of Education Honorable Priya Manikchan, in her presentation to the National Assembly, said that with the college going fully online, there has been an increased interest from citizens who want to be trained as teachers. This initiative will see teachers being trained across the country without leaving their homes or regions.
You have a teacher right now teaching in Kaikan. She's a single teacher. She's been teaching for 8 years. She wants to do this. She can't leave to come to college. We could train her right where she is. She could deliver education to the children in Kaikan as a trained teacher, sir. Nothing stopped the coalition from doing this.
The government has also allocated $1 billion for the establishment of an online learning institute that will deliver 4,500 scholarships in 2021 and a total of 20,000 scholarships over the next 5 years.
The big program that we begin this year, Mr. Speaker, is the National Online Learning Institute. $1 billion has been allocated in this year's budget, $1 billion, so that our young people, it's not limited to young people, but I suspect strongly, mostly young people will benefit from it. Our young people can get undergraduate degrees, can get master's programs, and can get PhDs. The program, Mr. Speaker, Indira Gandhi National Open University, the Jain deemed to be University India, UWI Open Campus, UWI Open Campus Vocational, International University of Applied Sciences, Germany. These are the initial set of universities we're dealing with. It will benefit 4,540 children, students, just this year.
Additionally, $5.2 billion has been allocated for the construction and rehabilitation of educational facilities nationwide, $3.3 billion has been allocated to the University of Guyana, and $884 million has been allocated to equip and retool technical and vocational training centers. In the area of agriculture, Budget 2021 provides an allocation of $2 billion for critical capital works at the Guyana Sugar Corporation in keeping with the government's manifesto promise to reopen the sugar industry. Minister of Agriculture, Honorable Zulfikar Mustafa, in explaining the allocation, said that the government was serious and committed to ensuring that every Guyanese is taken care of. He noted that with the right investment, management, and skills, the industry can recover from the damage inflicted by the former government over the past 5 years.
In 2015, when we left government, because of the work we would have done in the sugar industry, the production was 231,071 tons of sugar, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, in 2017, and here how it goes, after that the coalition took over, here how it goes. 2015, 231,000 tons. 2016, 183,000 tons. 2017, 137,000 tons. 2018, 104,000 tons. 2019, 92,000 tons. And last year, the lowest ever in the history of Gaisuko, 88,000 tons. That's what they did in the sugar industry, Mr. Speaker. That's what they did.
For the rice industry, 6 drying floors will be constructed at strategic rice producing locations to provide much needed support to farmers in regions 2, 3, 5, and 6. And a soil laboratory will be established to facilitate efficient and economic production of paddy. Additionally, $70 million has been allocated to support Hope Coconut Estate Limited, while the government will invest $832 million in agricultural infrastructure, including agro-processing and packaging facilities. A further $12 billion will be invested in critical interventions across the country in the area of drainage and irrigation.
NDIA, we have almost doubled the budget. $12 billion will be expended this year in the NDIA to do infrastructure for new pump station at Adventure, Cotton Field, Montrose. Over 54,000 acres of farmlands will be serviced by these pumps. We'll have excavators, new excavators to desilt channel and continue to build the bank on the Pomeroon. This year we'll procure a pontoon with 2 excavators specifically for the Pomeroon area. The area farmers will have a lot of relief there.
With a booming oil and gas sector, demands have increased for tourism and hospitality services and facilities in and around Guyana. The tourism sector has been hampered by the skills gap at all levels, with new opportunities for training. To address this glaring mismatch between demand and supply, in 2021, work will commence on the construction of the Hospitality Tourism Training Institute, HTTI.
Speaking of training, Mr. Speaker, more than $30 million has been allocated in Budget 2020 for training within the tourism sector. This will better position us to keep abreast with evolving trends within the sector and ensure that we meet the increasing expectation of our guests. In this regard, sir, I would mention that this budget 2021 provides an allocation of $185 million for the establishment of a tourism and hospitality institute, which will provide much needed instruction to persons who wish to pursue a career in the industry.
The government has also allocated a sum of $250 million to replenish the Small Business Development Fund, which under the APNU-AFC government was a paltry $100 million.
From the Small Business Development Fund to expand their operations or assist with startups. But, Mr. Speaker, restoring the ceiling is not the only thing we have done for small businesses. We have also, through the allocations in this budget, increased the total envelope available to $250 million, thereby expanding the amount of support for that sector.
Budget 2021 has also provided $135 million for the procurement of an electronic single-window system to make doing business easier in Guyana. On the infrastructure front, government has allocated $25.6 billion for roads and bridges, of which $23.7 billion will be spent on roads and $1.9 billion on bridges. This will see investments being made in upgrading a number of existing major roads and bridges, as well as initiating several new projects. An amount of $3.5 billion has been allocated for the commencement of the Linden to Mabura Hill Road, and a sum of $150 million has been budgeted for sectional rehabilitation of the Linden to Suzdijk Highway. $1 billion has been allocated for the continuation of the Eccles to Mandela Avenue Road, and $2.1 billion has been allocated for the upgrade of hinterland roads. Minister of Public Works Honorable Bishop Juan Edgel outlined several other projects which are on the cards for 2021 and covered under the budget, including the much-anticipated bridge linking Guyana to Suriname.
I'm referring to a new bridge across the Corentyne River, linking the island, Long Island, as a free port, free zone area, linking two countries, making it possible for Guyanese and others, international travelers, to move through South America, through Brazil, French Guyana, into Suriname, into Guyana, down the Linden-Lethem Road, over the Takatu, back into Brazil, and opening new possibilities for markets in South America. We are not talking bangles and bed sheets. We're talking major development. Corridors of development, sir, we're talking about. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about a new 4-lane, high-span concrete bridge across the Demerara River. Mr. Speaker, for the record, when we went out for expressions of interest, 21 companies showed interest.
In addition, an amount of $415 million is budgeted for the completion, upgrade, and rehabilitation of a number of hinterland airstrips, and a total of $5.1 billion has been budgeted to further strengthen our sea and river defense infrastructure. Earmarked for this year is the construction, rehabilitation, and maintenance of sea and river defense infrastructure in areas including Danzig, Prospect, Content, Fairfield, Zeeland, Cane Garden, Iflat, Anna Catarina, No. 63 Beach, Manila, and Bajivol, all flood-prone areas. A sum of $700 million has also been budgeted for the installation of 10 mini-grids and 4 off-grid systems in 2021. Additionally, solar farms will be installed at Madia and Legwan, and work will continue on solar farms at Bartica and Lethem. Moreover, 2 mini hydropower plants at Kumu and Mokomoko will be tendered this year, and construction will commence.
Now, more than ever, the world requires a reliable supply of electricity to prevent further disruption, and Guyana is no exception. With allocations of $240 million for the Sustainable Energy Program, $628.8 million for the Renewable Energy Improvement Power System Project, $750 million for the Energy Matrix Diversification Program, 500 million for the solar system project, and 125 million for the small hydro projects, our government will now work assiduously to implement the necessary measures that will result in improved standard of living for people through the generation and provision of sufficient, stable, and reliable electricity.
To address the challenges of the pandemic, government has significantly expanded the resources made available to the public health sector and budgeted $53.5 billion for 2021. In Budget 2021, to begin expanding diagnostic and specialty capacities across the country, $99.8 million is budgeted for re-equipping the National Ophthalmology Hospital in Port Morant, the only one of its kind in the country. Government also intends to spend $322 million in 2021 for the acquisition of medical equipment, including ventilators and anesthesia machines, which will serve to expand the diagnosis and treatment capacity at the National Referral Hospital.
That is why, Mr. Speaker, in this year's budget, we have allocated monies to buy all the necessary equipment and to pay the surgeons to come back to Guyana so that we can restart the pediatric cardiology program.
In a bid to strengthen the country's capacity to cope with the particular health needs of our mothers and children and reduce associated mortality rates, government has committed to over $140 million toward the financing of maternal waiting homes and facilities at Moruca, Enmore, and Cato, as well as $100 million for the construction and retrofitting of the maternity ward and wing at the New Amsterdam Hospital. Government has also made a provision of over $750 million to support the rolling out of COVID-19 vaccines from February and for the rest of the year in a phased approach, the first of which will cater to our frontline workers, the elderly, and persons living with disabilities.
We have immunized workers in Region 4, 3, 2, 6, 5, 8, 9, and 1, and 7. All over we spread it out. And guess what, Mr. Speaker? Tomorrow morning, we'll be getting 20,000 more vaccines that are coming in, and we'll be using that to immunize our workers. And on the 8th of March, International Women's Day, we'll be getting 80,000 more vaccines for the people of this country. And later in the month, we'll be getting another 100,000 through the COVAX mechanism so that we can immunize our population.
Housing is a major issue for Guyanese, and the government has promised to make 50,000 house lots available across the country over the next 5 years. To make this a reality, the PPP administration has made provisions in the national 2021 budget.
The housing sector has received an allocation of $8.9 billion, of which $6 billion is for infrastructure and utility works in new and existing areas, all aiding and advancing our commitment to allocating a minimum of 50,000 house lots to citizens within this, our first term in office. This year, Mr. Speaker, 2021 alone, we intend to allocate 10,000 house lots, 7,000, a minimum of 7,000 land titles to citizens, many of whom have been waiting for years to own their own homes.
Minister of Housing and Water Honorable Colin Crowell explained too, government will construct 1,000 homes for low-income earners and young professionals as it strives to improve the standard of living for all Guyanese. Additionally, the government has taken measures to remove taxes from critical materials in the construction industry to make building easier.
We are also ensuring that the private sector partners can contribute to the housing drive, and so the ease of the burden of high construction and material costs, we have removed the VAT from locally produced building and construction materials, including sand, stone, concrete blocks, plywoods, logs, and lumber. This means, Mr. Speaker, that those persons who have house lots and who are beneficiaries can look forward to paying cheaper prices for building materials.
He noted too that the provisions in the National 2021 budget are not simply limited to the provisions of house lots and infrastructure, but it also caters to existing homeowners as the loan ceiling has been increased.
We have made provisions for the first time for homeowners to also get extra monies by raising the low-income mortgage ceiling to $12 million, as well as increasing the ceiling for mortgage issued by the New Building Society from $12 million to $15 million. This intervention was highly anticipated by homeowners, as it means, Mr. Speaker, that their interest rates will be low, and of course, that other commercial banks will now have to become more competitive.
Government has also made provisions for a 5% reduction in water tariffs across the board, targeting all levels of consumers.
It's a very great pleasure to stand here before you as an elected member and support the largest budget ever presented in this country's history. And I'm also very pleased to stand here as the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport to also say that this is the largest budget for the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport in this country's history.
The government is cognizant of the role played by youths in the development of the country. In keeping with this recognition, government has made provisions through the Department of Youth for over $85 million to deliver youth-targeted training in areas including robotics, oil and gas, climate change and the environment, information technology, and agro-processing. $30 million has been allocated for grants to the cultural and creative industries, for which emphasis will be placed on original cultural and creative projects, while the government has also budgeted $1.5 billion to facilitate the development of sport across the country. Of this amount, $915.5 million is allocated for the improvement of community grounds and spaces. Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, Honorable Charles Ramson, said that the ministry has begun and will continue its works programs in 2021 as provided for in the budget.
Even in a pandemic, that we are an events-driven ministry. We've already done more in 6 months than the AP and UAFC 3 ministers has done in the last 5 years. And we have tapped into an untapped resource, which we have found that the country wants to be able to build with this government. And I've personally visited and assessed community grounds and started doing work with those grounds in the following: Burnham's Park, New Amsterdam, Albion Sports Complex, Port Morant Community Ground, Chesney Ball Field, Cane Field, Agricola Community Ground, Golden Fleece Ground, Reliance Ground, Lima Ground, Anna Regina Ground, Affiance Ground, Pomona Community Ground, Aurora, Rose Hall, Kanji, Jai Hind, Hampshire, Crabwood Creek, Line Path, Number 70, Wim, Buxton Community Ground, Better Hope Community Center, LBI Community Center, Enterprise, and more. Linden.
Budget 2021 makes special provisions for the vulnerable groups in society. A total of $29.5 billion has been approved by the National Assembly for the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security.
$80 million have been directed towards training of women. We have not seen in any budget presentation prior to this one in recent time that specific allocation, none. Training of women will give them the impetus that they need to move to a state of independence from a state of dependence, to move from skills training into the world of work, vocational training,
We are shattering the gender stereotypes.
In addition, old age pensions have been increased from $20,500 to $25,000. Public assistance has improved from $9,000 to $12,000 monthly. $120 million has been set aside for programs supporting the community of persons living with disabilities, with an additional $50 million allocated to the National Commission on Disability.
I would like to thank the Minister of Finance for paying attention to this population, and that is the population of persons living with disability. A $30 million modern building will be constructed in the compound of the Mahaika Hospital and serve as a hub for training of persons living with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, that's original. Mr. Speaker, we will be working with these groups of persons to ensure that they are trained to join the labor market, to be competitive, and to also start their own enterprises.
Further, over $50 million has been approved for Help in Shelter and to increase subventions to organizations providing support to victims of domestic violence.
A lot of our attention will be focused on violence. And in addition to launching 914, we signed on to the Spotlight Initiative. You can see, Mr. Speaker, nothing has been excluded.
With Guyana growing and developing at a rapid rate, there exists a need for new and updated pieces of legislation in every sector. Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs Honorable Anil Nandlal said that his ministry will undertake a heavy legislative agenda in 2021 and the budget caters for these.
Our major focus will be the creation of a modern legal infrastructure that will regulate these new and emerging sectors, while at the same time revamp our archaic laws to complete a new and modern legal framework for Guyana. So every conceivable area of economic activity will be targeted for legal reforms. An international consultant will be retained to draft a compendium of legislation for the oil and gas sector. In the housing and hospitality sector, we will have a whole new regime of legislation dealing with zoning, urban planning, condominiums, townhouses. In the health sector, we have identified approximately 25 pieces of legislation we will work on, including new Public Health Act, a new Mental Health Act, organ transplant legislation, a new Food and Drug Act, and many more. In the agri-sector, we will be enacting a food safety bill and a food security act and other pieces of legislation that will ready Guyana to export agricultural products.
Additionally, the sum of $325 million has been budgeted for this year for interventions including strengthening of probation services and legal aid. Provisions have also been made too for the construction of new magistrates' courts across the country.
New magistrates' court building with living quarters and supporting facilities will be constructed at Port Kaituma, Mabaruma, Vigilance, and the Lower East Bank Demerara. Mr. Speaker, a total of $4.6 billion has been allocated for the legal and justice sector. We have already expended over $1 million in the construction, installation, and functioning of 32 containerized virtual courtrooms located at Lusignan, Mazaruni, Timeri, and New Amsterdam, whereby prisoners who are in custody at these prison centers can have their cases heard in these courts, obviating the need to transport them across the country to various locations.
Public safety and security are important for the well-being of any citizen and to promote and safeguard investments in any country. The PPP government recognizes this, and as such, $15.3 billion has been allocated to the Guyana Police Force. Of this amount, $300 million will be spent to upgrade its land and water fleet. $5 billion has been allocated to enhance the operations of the Guyana Prison Service, including the Lusignan Prison, while $1.9 billion will be spent on the relocation of the Guyana Fire Service from Stabroek Market Square, for the construction of a new fire station at Eccles, and the procurement of 6 water tenders and 2 ambulances. Additionally, $830 million has been budgeted for the rehabilitation and maintenance of several police stations, $95 million to support community policing groups, and a building will also be constructed at the Mazaruni prison to accommodate 220 high-profile inmates. Meanwhile, citizens across the country have welcomed the measures announced in the 2021 budget. While some have welcomed the fact that there are no new taxes, others welcome the restoration of the $15,000 per child grant, the introduction of the Online Learning Institute, and the massive infrastructural works that will be undertaken this year.
Once there is no new taxes, again everybody can benefit. You know, it's less burden because it's COVID already carry a whole set of burden, additional burden to the business, to individual living and every other things. So generally, once there's no new taxes and there is more money to the health sector to give out more money, it means it's a plus for the whole nation, the business as well as individual.
We don't need more taxes. We got enough taxes we pay in, and I think it's a good job. We really need more money in the country for people, you know, to shop and everything else, you know what I mean? People, more money in people's pocket that they could come and support the store owners and the businesses. And because we had a tough time. I closed for 6 months because of the COVID. And it was tough, but I feel confident that everything is going to fall into place and all of us are going to benefit from it.
I see some improvement, and I like the fact that they giving back the children the $15,000 voucher.
Certain parts of the budget, the initiative was well planned out. There could have been a little bit more effort placed into it, but I guess the public can, or if they do or they are, should be pleased a little bit by the differences.
Truly, for me as a Guyanese, it's good for me, right? Like for instance, like the water is very good, and likewise the complete budget is good for Guyanese. I look at the health, and then I look at the infrastructure and these facilities. They are good for Guyanese, right? And I support that.
Having overlooked some of the topics and the main points in the budget, I have noticed that there is no increase in certain things like commodities, important commodities, and no tax increase, which is a burden on poor persons. I must commend the government for increasing the old age pension.
From my perspective, it's good what the government is doing, and I'm glad to know that things will be better tomorrow and for the future for everybody.
I personally feel that the budget is a good one, very good one, and meaningful one to the people of the country, the people in the country. And I'm saying based on the resources that we have available at the moment with the oil and gas sector now coming into play, I hope that this government will use it to benefit the country and make the country a little more livable, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's a good one.
It's a good budget. It's good for the senior folks. The money, the tariff has been, it's better for them. It's going to be good for our children. Basically, I'm from the interior, and so it's going to be a great help to us. Also with our transportation and education-wise. We're glad for the grant for the children, for the school children. I think that's a good initiative. Because it was there and they took it away, but it's back and we're very glad for that. Concerning the VAT on, taking off VAT on food items, I think that's a good initiative also. It's very good for us. We have more money in the pockets to spend. Things kind of been up. It was very expensive, but it's way back where it was before, and we really appreciate that.
Budget 2021 ensures that the country not only recovers from the aftermath of the 2020 general and regional elections, but also puts in place the policies needed to spur rapid economic growth and development in the near and medium term, and lays the foundation needed to ensure that that growth is not brief or temporary, but sustainable for the long term. This has been Budget in Focus. I am Gomiti Gangadin saying thank you for watching. Goodbye.